Cassandra Thorne had always believed that excellence spoke for itself. For 8 years, she had poured her soul into building the marketing department at Sterling and Associates, from a 2-person operation into the crown jewel of the company. Her campaigns had generated over $15 million in revenue. Her client retention rate was an unprecedented 97%, and her team had won 3 industry awards in the past year alone. Standing in the pristine conference room, on the 42nd floor, watching the city sprawl beneath her through floor-to-ceiling windows, Cassandra felt the familiar surge of pride that came with knowing she had earned her place at this table. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the soft lighting, surrounded by leather chairs that had witnessed countless strategic decisions. Today's meeting was supposed to be routine, quarterly performance reviews and budget discussions for the upcoming fiscal year. "Cassandra, excellent work on the Morrison campaign," James Sterling said, his silver hair catching the afternoon light as he nodded approvingly from the head of the table. The 62-year-old CEO had founded Sterling and Associates 30 years ago, building it from a small consulting firm into a multinational corporation. "The client feedback has been exceptional. They're already asking about expanding the contract." She smiled, feeling the warmth of recognition wash over her. The Morrison account had been a challenging one, a tech startup that needed complete brand repositioning to attract institutional investors. Her team had worked 18-hour days for 3 months, crafting a narrative that transformed their image from scrappy disruptors to industry leaders. The campaign had exceeded every metric they'd set. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. The team really pushed themselves on that one. I think we've found a formula that could work for similar clients in the tech sector." Cassandra's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had backed up every claim with results. Around the table, the other department heads nodded with varying degrees of enthusiasm. She had learned to read these faces over the years. Some genuinely respected her achievements, while others harbored the subtle resentment that often accompanied watching someone else's rapid ascent. Marcus Webb, the CFO, cleared his throat as he shuffled through his papers. "The numbers are impressive, certainly. Marketing's ROI has increased by 43% this quarter alone." His tone was professional but carried an undercurrent that Cassandra couldn't quite identify. Something felt different about today's meeting, a tension in the air that hadn't been present during previous reviews. James Sterling stood, walking to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. This was his thinking pose, one Cassandra had observed during countless strategic discussions. When he turned back to face the room, his expression had shifted from approving to something more complex, apologetic, perhaps, or uncomfortable. "Which brings me to an important announcement," he began, his voice taking on the formal tone he used for significant company communications. "As we continue to grow and evolve, we need to ensure our leadership structure reflects both our values and our long-term strategic vision." Cassandra felt her stomach tighten slightly. Leadership announcements in companies like Sterling and Associates usually meant promotions, restructuring, or strategic partnerships. Given her department's performance, she had been quietly hoping for a promotion to Vice President of Marketing, a role that would give her a seat on the executive committee and stock options that would secure her financial future. "After careful consideration and consultation with the board," James continued, his eyes scanning the room but somehow avoiding direct contact with Cassandra, "we've decided to bring in fresh leadership for our marketing department, someone who can provide a new perspective and help us reach the next level of growth." The words hit Cassandra like a physical blow. Fresh leadership? Her department was the most successful in the company's history. What fresh perspective could possibly improve on results that had exceeded every benchmark they'd set? She kept her expression neutral, years of corporate experience having taught her to never show weakness in front of colleagues. But inside, confusion and alarm were battling for dominance. "I'd like you all to meet Victoria Sterling, who will be joining us as our new Director of Marketing." James's smile broadened as the conference room door opened, and a young woman entered with the kind of confident stride that suggested she belonged anywhere she chose to be. Victoria Sterling was 28 years old, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her blonde hair was styled in a sleek bob that framed a face that was undeniably beautiful, but carried an expression of entitlement that made Cassandra's skin crawl. She moved with the practiced grace of someone who had never doubted their place in the world, never had to prove themselves, never had to fight for recognition. Victoria has an MBA from Wharton and has spent the last 3 years working in brand management at several prestigious firms in New York, James announced, his pride in his daughter evident in every word. She's bringing innovative ideas about digital marketing and social media integration that will help us capture younger demographics. Cassandra's mind reeled. 3 years of experience compared to her 8. Brand management at other firms versus building an entire department from scratch. Innovative ideas about digital marketing, as if Cassandra's team hadn't been pioneering social media strategies that other companies now copied. The injustice of it was breathtaking, but what was worse was the realization that this decision had nothing to do with qualifications or performance. It was about family, about succession, about keeping power within the Sterling bloodline. Cassandra, I hope you'll help Victoria transition into her new role, James said, finally meeting her eyes. Your experience will be invaluable in helping her understand our client relationships and operational procedures. The request was presented as an honor, but Cassandra recognized it for what it was, a demotion disguised as mentorship. She was being asked to train her replacement, to hand over 8 years of relationship building and strategic development to someone who had been given the position she had earned. The humiliation was complete and calculated. Of course, Cassandra replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning in her chest. I'm happy to help with the transition. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but she had learned long ago that showing emotion in corporate settings was a luxury she couldn't afford. Women, especially women who had climbed as high as she had, were always being watched for signs of instability or unprofessionalism. Victoria smiled, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I'm so excited to work with you, Cassandra. Dad has told me wonderful things about what you've built here. The casual reference to Dad in a professional setting was like salt in the wound, a reminder of the nepotism that had just cost Cassandra everything she had worked for. As the meeting concluded, and colleagues began filing out of the conference room, offering awkward congratulations to Victoria and careful nods to Cassandra, she remained seated, trying to process what had just happened. 8 years of 60-hour soy, weeks of missing family gatherings to handle client emergencies, of sacrificing relationships and personal time to build something extraordinary. All of it had been swept aside in a matter of minutes. Marcus Webb lingered as the room emptied, approaching Cassandra with an expression that mixed sympathy with something that looked uncomfortably like relief. I know this is difficult, he said quietly, but the board felt it was important to bring in someone with fresh energy and new ideas. Fresh energy, Cassandra repeated, the phrase hanging in the air between them. Is that what we're calling it? Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. The business is changing rapidly. Social media, influencer marketing, digital transformation. These are areas where younger professionals often have advantages. It was a diplomatic way of saying she was being replaced by someone younger, prettier, and more importantly, related to the CEO. Cassandra nodded slowly, understanding that arguing would only make her appear bitter and unprofessional. In the DAO, corporate world, there were battles worth fighting and battles that would only destroy your reputation. This appeared to be the latter. I understand, she said, gathering her portfolio and standing with as much dignity as she could muster. When would you like me to begin the transition process? Victoria will start on Monday. Perhaps you could spend the week bringing her up to speed on current campaigns and client relationships. Marcus's suggestion was delivered as a question, but they both knew it was really a directive. As Cassandra walked back to her office, she passed the marketing department she had built from nothing. Her team was busy at their desks, unaware that their world was about to change dramatically. She had hired most of them personally, had mentored them through challenging projects, had fought for their raises and promotions. Now she would have to tell them that someone with 3 years of experience would be leading them, someone who had never managed a campaign budget over $2 million or navigated the complex politics of a major corporate client. Her office, located in the corner with windows overlooking the city, suddenly felt like a mausoleum of her former ambitions. Awards lined the walls, client testimonials filled a thick binder on her desk, and strategic plans for the next quarter were spread across her workspace. All of it would soon belong to Victoria Sterling, who would probably redecorate and implement changes just to establish her authority. Cassandra sank into her chair, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had just occurred. She had been naive to think that excellence would be enough, that results would speak louder than relationships. In the end, she was just an employee, no matter how successful, while Victoria was family. The game had been rigged from the beginning, and she had been too focused on playing it well to notice. Her computer chimed with an email notification. The message was from James Sterling, marked as high priority, with the subject line, "Transition Planning Confidential." She opened it with a sense of dread, expecting more details about her demotion disguised as an opportunity. The email was brief and professional, outlining her new role as Senior Marketing Consultant, a title that sounded impressive but came with reduced responsibilities and, she was certain, reduced compensation. She would be assisting Victoria with client relationships and providing strategic guidance, while the new director developed her own approach to department management. It was corporate speak for being relegated to a supporting role in the empire she had built. But as Cassandra read the final paragraph, her blood ran cold. The email mentioned that several key clients had been informed of the leadership change and had expressed enthusiasm about working with Victoria's fresh perspective and innovative approach. The Morrison Group, their largest client, and the one whose campaign had just earned such praise, was specifically mentioned as being excited about the transition. The betrayal was complete. Not only had she been replaced, but her clients, relationships she had nurtured for years, were being transferred to Victoria as if they were corporate assets rather than personal professional connections. The Morrison Group's CEO, David Morrison, had specifically requested Cassandra's involvement in their account because of her understanding of their industry and corporate culture. Now he was apparently excited to work with someone he had never met. Cassandra closed her laptop and stared out the window at the city below. Somewhere in those glass towers were competitors who would value her experience, companies that would recognize her achievements rather than discount them in favor of family connections. For 8 years, she had been loyal to Sterling and Associates, turning down multiple offers from headhunters who had tried to recruit her. That loyalty had just been repaid with humiliation and demotion. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant. "Victoria Sterling is here for a preliminary meeting. Should I send her in?" The moment of truth had arrived faster than expected. Cassandra straightened her blazer, checked her reflection in her computer screen, and prepared to meet the woman who had just stolen her career. Whatever happened next, she would handle it with professionalism and grace. But as she stood to greet her replacement, one thought echoed in her mind with crystal clarity. This wasn't over. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Victoria Sterling glided into Cassandra's office like she owned it. Which, technically, she now did. "This is gorgeous!" Victoria's voice carried that particular blend of entitlement and manufactured enthusiasm that only came from a lifetime of getting exactly what you wanted. She spun slowly, taking in the awards, the client photos, the strategic whiteboards covered in Cassandra's handwriting. Dad always said the marketing department had the best view in the building. Cassandra forced her lips into what she hoped resembled a smile. Thank you. Please, have a seat. She gestured to the chairs facing her desk, noting how Victoria's gaze lingered on the executive chair behind it. The chair that would soon be hers. Actually, I was hoping we could sit somewhere more casual. Victoria's request sounded like a suggestion, but her tone made it clear she was already making executive decisions. Maybe the couch area. I find formal setups so intimidating for collaboration. Collaboration. The word tasted bitter. Cassandra moved to the small seating area by the windows, watching Victoria settle into the leather sofa like a cat claiming territory. Everything about her screamed privilege, from her $1,000 handbag to the way she crossed her legs without checking if her skirt was appropriate. So, Victoria began, pulling out an iPad with a rose gold case. I've been reviewing the department metrics, and I have to say, you've done incredible work here. She swiped through screens with practiced efficiency. The Morrison campaign especially. Those engagement numbers are impressive. Thank you. Cassandra kept her voice neutral, professional. But inside, fury was building like pressure in a kettle. You've been reviewing department metrics. How long had this transition been planned? How long had she been performing for an audience that had already decided her fate? I do have some thoughts about optimization opportunities, though. Victoria's smile widened, revealing perfect teeth that probably cost more than Cassandra's car. The social media integration feels a bit dated? Like, we're not leveraging TikTok at all, and our Instagram strategy is very millennial-focused when Gen Z is really driving purchasing decisions now. Cassandra's jaw tightened. Their Instagram strategy had increased client engagement by 200% over the past year. Their demographic research showed their target market was primarily 35 to 55, hardly Gen Z territory. But correcting Victoria would only make her look defensive, territorial. The trap was already being set. I'd love to hear your ideas, Cassandra said instead, pulling out her own notebook. If she was going to be forced into mentorship, she'd at least document every suggestion for when they inevitably failed. Victoria's eyes lit up. Okay, so I'm thinking we pivot hard into authentic storytelling, user-generated content, micro-influencer partnerships, maybe some guerrilla marketing. That feels more grassroots. The Morrison Group, for example, they're too corporate right now. We need to humanize their brand. The Morrison Group was a 70-year-old manufacturing company with a conservative board and traditional values. They had specifically chosen Sterling and Associates because they wanted sophisticated professional marketing that reinforced their stability and reliability. Humanizing their brand would be like putting a tech startup CEO in overalls, jarring and completely off message. That's interesting, Cassandra managed. David Morrison is pretty particular about brand consistency, though. He's mentioned several times that he appreciates our understanding of their corporate culture. Right, but that's exactly the problem. Victoria leaned forward, animated now. Corporate culture is dying. Authenticity is everything. Consumers want to see the real people behind brands, not some sterile corporate image. Cassandra bit her tongue. Victoria was quoting marketing buzzwords like they were revolutionary insights, completely missing the nuanced reality of client management. Different industries, different demographics, different brand personalities required different approaches. The Morrison Group's sterile corporate image had helped them weather 3 economic downturns and build a billion-dollar company. Have you had a chance to review their brand guidelines? Cassandra asked carefully. Victoria waved dismissively. Brand guidelines are just starting points. The best campaigns break rules. She scrolled through her iPad again. I actually had coffee with David Morrison yesterday. Dad set it up. Super sweet guy. He's totally open to fresh ideas. The words hit Cassandra like ice water. David Morrison. The client she had cultivated for 4 years, who trusted her judgment implicitly, who had specifically requested her involvement in all strategic decisions. He'd had coffee with Victoria yesterday. While Cassandra was sitting in meetings, believing she was secure in her position, Victoria had already been meeting with her clients. He mentioned that he's excited about some younger energy on the account, Victoria continued, oblivious to the devastation she was causing. Said the campaign has been successful, but maybe a little safe? He's ready to take some risks. Cassandra's hands clenched involuntarily. David Morrison had never mentioned wanting to take risks. He had praised their strategic approach just 2 weeks ago, specifically commenting on how Cassandra understood the delicate balance between innovation and tradition that his industry required. Either Victoria was misinterpreting his polite small talk, or David was telling different people what he thought they wanted to hear. Did he mention any specific areas where he felt we'd been too conservative? Cassandra asked, her professional mask slipping slightly. Well, not specifically, but you know how it is with older clients. They don't always express dissatisfaction directly. Victoria's tone was patronizing, as if she were explaining basic psychology to a child. You have to read between the lines, pick up on subtle cues. It's all about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. From someone who couldn't read the room well enough to realize she was describing Cassandra's relationship management skills to Cassandra herself. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Victoria's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with the casual attention of someone who had never worried about job security. Oh, that's Dad. He wants to know if we can move our timeline up. Apparently, the Morrison Group wants to fast-track their Q4 campaign launch. Fast-track? Cassandra's voice sharpened. We're already on an aggressive timeline. The creative briefs aren't even finalized, and we haven't completed the market research for their new product line. Right, but that's kind of the point. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. Sometimes you have to move fast and iterate as you go. Agile marketing, you know. The research can happen alongside creative development. Cassandra felt something cold settle in her stomach. The Morrison Group's Q4 campaign was their largest of the year, tied to a product launch that represented 18 months of development and a $20 million investment. Rushing it would be corporate suicide, the kind of mistake that could end careers and destroy client relationships. Victoria, I need to be clear about something. Cassandra stood as well, her professional composure finally cracking. The Morrison Group isn't a startup. They don't iterate and pivot. They plan meticulously, execute flawlessly, and measure everything. Twice. Agile marketing isn't part of their corporate DNA. Victoria's smile faltered for the first time, a flash of irritation crossing her features. I appreciate your concern, Cassandra, but I think you might be underestimating both the client and modern marketing approaches. Sometimes experience can make us too cautious. Too cautious. The phrase hung in the air between them like a challenge. Cassandra realized she was looking at someone who had never failed, never had to clean up a disaster, never had to call a client at midnight to explain why their campaign had backfired. Victoria's confidence wasn't based on competence. It was based on ignorance of what could go wrong. When do you officially start? Cassandra asked, sitting back down heavily. Monday. But I'll probably be in and out this week, getting familiar with everything. Victoria gathered her things, already moving toward the door. I'm so grateful for your support during this transition. I know change can be hard, but I think we're going to make an amazing team. After Victoria left, Cassandra sat alone in her office, staring at the strategic plans spread across her desk. Plans that would soon become someone else's responsibility, someone else's potential failure. She thought about David Morrison, a man she respected both personally and professionally, apparently expressing enthusiasm for changes that could destroy everything they'd built together. Her computer chimed with an email from Victoria, sent from her new company address that had apparently been set up days ago. The subject line read, "Exciting updates for Morrison Q4 campaign." Cassandra opened it with growing dread. Victoria had already scheduled a team meeting for tomorrow morning to discuss pivoting the Morrison strategy to leverage emerging social trends and authentic storytelling opportunities. She had also arranged another coffee meeting with David Morrison for Thursday, this time including key stakeholders from their product development team. The speed was breathtaking. Victoria hadn't just been handed Cassandra's job. She was systematically dismantling everything Cassandra had built, relationship by relationship, strategy by strategy. And she was doing it with the kind of confident enthusiasm that only came from never having experienced the consequences of being wrong. Cassandra's phone rang. The caller ID showed David Morrison's direct line. Her heart stopped. David never called, unless something was urgent, usually a crisis that needed immediate attention. Her finger hovered over the answer button, uncertain whether she was still authorized to take calls from clients who were apparently excited about working with her. Replacement. "Hello, David," she answered, keeping her voice steady. "Cassandra, thank God." David's voice carried an edge of frustration she'd rarely heard. "I just got off a very strange call with Victoria Sterling. She wants to completely redesign our Q4 campaign based on some TikTok trend she saw. Please tell me this is some kind of miscommunication." The next morning arrived with the kind of gray Seattle drizzle that made everything look like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Cassandra stood in her kitchen, staring at her reflection in the chrome surface of her coffee maker, wondering if this would be the last time she performed this ritual as director of marketing. Her phone had been buzzing since 5 a.m. with messages from her team. Word was spreading through the department like wildfire. Hushed conversations by the copy machine, nervous glances across cubicles, the kind of electric uncertainty that preceded major layoffs or acquisitions. Sarah M. "Is it true about Victoria Sterling?" Mike Chen. "Emergency meeting at 9? What's happening?" Lisa Park. "Please tell me you're not leaving us." Each message felt like a small knife twist. These people had trusted her, followed her vision, worked impossible hours because they believed in what they were building together. Now she had to stand in front of them and smile while handing their futures to someone who thought manufacturing equipment needed dance challenges. Cassandra's hands shook as she applied her lipstick, not from nerves, but from a rage so pure, it felt almost cleansing. She'd spent the night combing through her employment contract, looking for any clause that might protect her position. What she'd found instead was a labyrinth of corporate language designed to protect Sterling and Associates, not its employees. Termination clauses, non-compete agreements, intellectual property transfers, all favoring the company. But David Morrison's contract was different. Section 12.4 wasn't just a preference, it was a legal requirement. Sterling and Associates had agreed, in writing, to maintain Cassandra's direct involvement in all strategic decisions for the Morrison account. Breaking that clause would constitute breach of contract, potentially voiding their entire agreement. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. The familiar ding of arrival, the swoosh of opening doors, the smell of expensive carpet and industrial-strength coffee. All of it might become someone else's daily experience soon. Victoria was waiting in the conference room, her laptop open, presentation slides already queued. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her hair styled in loose waves that looked effortlessly perfect, the kind of polished appearance that came from having a personal stylist and unlimited budget. Good morning! Victoria's enthusiasm could have powered a small city. "I'm so excited about today. I stayed up until midnight working on the new direction for the Morrison campaign. I think you're going to love what I've come up with." Cassandra poured herself coffee from the conference room sideboard, buying time. The Morrison campaign that had taken her team 3 months to research, develop, and refine was about to be dismantled by someone who'd spent 12 hours on PowerPoint slides. The marketing team filed in gradually. Sarah Martinez, her senior, account manager, looked like she hadn't slept. Mike Chen kept checking his phone nervously. Lisa Park clutched a notebook like a security blanket. These weren't just employees. They were people who'd trusted Cassandra to protect their careers, who'd followed her through challenging campaigns and impossible deadlines. "Before we begin," Cassandra said, standing at the head of the table, "I want to address the changes happening in our department." Her voice carried steady authority, the same tone she'd used to calm clients during crisis situations. "As you've probably heard, Victoria Sterling will be joining us as the new director of marketing." The silence was deafening. Sarah's face went pale. Mike's pen snapped in his grip. Lisa's notebook trembled in her hands. Victoria stood, her smile radiant. "Thank you, Cassandra. I'm absolutely thrilled to be working with such a talented team. I know we're going to accomplish amazing things together." "What about the Morrison launch?" Sarah's question cut through Victoria's prepared speech like a blade. "We're 3 weeks from the campaign launch. The creative is finalized. Media is booked. Everything's approved." Victoria's smile never wavered. "That's actually perfect timing for some exciting changes. I've been reviewing the campaign, and I think we can make it much more impactful with some strategic pivots." She clicked to her first slide. Morrison Group, Authentic Engagement Strategy. The presentation was sleek, professional, completely disconnected from reality. Charts showed engagement metrics for construction equipment TikTok videos. Demographic breakdowns targeted audiences who would never purchase industrial machinery. Budget allocations that defied basic mathematical logic. "Our current approach treats Morrison like a traditional B2B company," Victoria explained, clicking through slides of influencer marketing proposals and social media activation strategies. "But every company needs to think like a lifestyle brand. Now, we're going to humanize their equipment, make it aspirational." Mike raised his hand tentatively. "Victoria, I've been working on the Morrison account for 2 years. Their buyers are procurement managers at construction companies. They make decisions based on specifications, warranty terms, and ROI calculations. They don't care about lifestyle. Branding. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to evolve beyond," Victoria replied, her tone patient but condescending. "Market research can only tell us what customers think they want. Innovative marketing creates desire they didn't know they had." Cassandra watched her team's faces cycle through confusion, disbelief, and barely contained panic. These were professionals who understood their industry, their clients, their market dynamics. They were being told to ignore everything they knew in favor of strategies that would torpedo their most important client relationship. "He mentioned that he's excited about some younger energy on the account," Victoria continued, oblivious to the devastation she was causing. "Said the campaign has been successful, but maybe a little safe. He's ready to take some risks." Cassandra's hands clenched involuntarily. David Morrison had never mentioned wanting to take risks. He had praised their strategic approach just 2 weeks ago, specifically commenting on how Cassandra understood the delicate balance between innovation and tradition that his industry required. Either Victoria was misinterpreting his polite small talk, or David was telling different people what he thought they wanted to hear. "Did he mention any specific areas where he felt we'd been too conservative?" Cassandra asked, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Well, not specifically, but you know how it is with older clients. They don't always express dissatisfaction directly." Victoria's tone was patronizing, as if she were explaining basic psychology to a child. "You have to read between the lines, pick up on subtle cues. It's all about emotional intelligence." Emotional intelligence. From someone who couldn't read the room well enough to realize she was describing Cassandra's relationship management skills to Cassandra herself. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Victoria's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with the casual attention of someone who had never worried about job security. "Oh, that's Dad. He wants to know if we can move our timeline up. Apparently, the Morrison Group wants to fast-track their Q4 campaign launch." "Fast-track?" Cassandra's voice sharpened. We're already on an aggressive timeline. The creative briefs aren't even finalized, and we haven't completed the market research for their new product line. Right, but that's kind of the point. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. Sometimes you have to move fast and iterate as you go. Agile marketing, you know? The research can happen alongside creative development. Cassandra felt something cold settle in her stomach. The Morrison Group's Q4 campaign was their largest of the year, tied to a product launch that represented 18 months of development and a $20 million investment. Rushing it would be corporate suicide, the kind of mistake that could end careers and destroy client relationships. Victoria, I need to be clear about something. Cassandra stood as well, her professional composure finally cracking. The Morrison Group isn't a startup. They don't iterate and pivot. They plan meticulously, execute flawlessly, and measure everything. Twice. Agile marketing isn't part of their corporate DNA. Victoria's smile faltered for the first time, a flash of irritation crossing her features. I appreciate your concern, Cassandra, but I think you might be underestimating both the client and modern marketing approaches. Sometimes experience can make us too cautious. Too cautious. The phrase hung in the air between them like a challenge. Cassandra realized she was looking at someone who had never failed, never had to clean up a disaster, never had to call a client at midnight to explain why their campaign had backfired. Victoria's confidence wasn't based on competence. It was based on ignorance of what could go wrong. When do you officially start? Cassandra asked, sitting back down heavily. Monday. But I'll probably be in and out this week, getting familiar with everything. Victoria gathered her things, already moving toward the door. I'm so grateful for your support during this transition. I know change can be hard, but I think we're going to make an amazing team. After Victoria left, Cassandra sat alone in her office, staring at the strategic plans spread across her desk. Plans that would soon become someone else's responsibility, someone else's potential failure. She thought about David Morrison, a man she respected both personally and professionally, apparently expressing enthusiasm for changes that could destroy everything they'd built together. Her computer chimed with an email from Victoria, sent from her new company address that had apparently been set up days ago. The subject line read, Exciting updates for Morrison Q4 campaign. Cassandra opened it with growing dread. Victoria had already scheduled a team meeting for tomorrow morning to discuss pivoting the Morrison strategy to leverage emerging social trends and authentic storytelling opportunities. She had also arranged another coffee meeting with David Morrison for Thursday, this time including key stakeholders from their product development team. The speed was breathtaking. Victoria hadn't just been handed Cassandra's job. She was systematically dismantling everything Cassandra had built. Relationship by relationship, strategy by strategy. And she was doing it with the kind of confident enthusiasm that only came from never having experienced the consequences of being wrong. Cassandra's phone rang. The caller ID showed David Morrison's direct line. Her heart stopped. David never called. Unless something was urgent, usually a crisis that needed immediate attention. Her finger hovered over the answer button, uncertain whether she was still authorized to take calls from clients who were apparently excited about working with her. Replacement? Hello, David, she answered, keeping her voice steady. Cassandra, thank God. David's voice carried an edge of frustration she'd rarely heard. I just got off a very strange call with Victoria Sterling. She wants to completely redesign our Q4 campaign based on some TikTok trend she saw. Please tell me this is some kind of miscommunication. Thursday morning, Cassandra arrived at the office to find chaos. Sarah stood outside the Morrison Group conference room, her usually perfect composure shattered. She fired the entire creative team, she whispered, clutching a tablet like a lifeline. All of them. This morning, security escorted them out 20 minutes ago. Through the glass walls, Cassandra could see Victoria setting up presentation materials, while 3 young interns, none older than 23, arranged folders with trembling hands. The Morrison campaign materials that had taken months to develop were scattered across the table like crime scene evidence. On what grounds? Cassandra's voice came out steadier than she felt. Resistance to change. Lack of innovative thinking. Sarah's laugh bordered on hysteria. Marcus Chen designed the visual identity that won us the Advertising Excellence Award. Lisa Park increased Morrison's brand recognition by 60%. But apparently, they weren't digitally native enough. The conference room door opened, and Victoria emerged with the kind of radiant confidence that only came from complete ignorance of impending disaster. She wore a different outfit than yesterday: powder blue blazer, statement jewelry that caught the fluorescent lights like tiny spotlights. Cassandra. Perfect timing. David Morrison just called from his car. He'll be here in 10 minutes. I've prepared an amazing presentation showcasing our new creative direction. Victoria's excitement was genuine, which somehow made it more terrifying. The fresh team brings such incredible energy. You're going to love seeing their work. Cassandra glanced through the glass at the 3 interns, who looked like they might vomit from stress. One was frantically Googling something on her phone. Another kept rearranging the same stack of papers. The third stared at a laptop screen with the expression of someone watching a horror movie. Victoria, these changes seem quite sudden. Has, James approved restructuring the entire creative department? Dad trusts my judgment on staffing decisions. Victoria's casual use of dad in professional settings still jarred, but now it carried additional weight, a reminder that normal corporate accountability didn't apply to her. Besides, change is uncomfortable, but that's how you know you're growing. The elevator chimed, and David Morrison stepped out with the purposeful stride of a man who'd built an empire through decisive action. 58 years old, silver-haired, wearing a navy suit that cost more than most cars, he commanded attention without trying. Behind him walked Jennifer Walsh, Morrison Group's VP of Marketing, and Tom Bradley, their Chief Operating Officer. Cassandra's stomach dropped. David hadn't mentioned bringing his entire executive team. This wasn't a routine quarterly review. This was a formal evaluation of Sterling & Associates' performance. The kind of meeting that ended with either contract renewal or termination. David, wonderful to see you. Victoria extended her hand with practiced charm. I'm Victoria Sterling, the new Director of Marketing. I'm so excited to share what we've developed for your Q4 campaign. David's handshake was brief, professional. His eyes found Cassandra immediately. Cassandra, good to see you. I trust you'll be joining us for this presentation. The question carried weight that everyone in the hallway could feel. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course she will, Victoria answered before Cassandra could respond. Cassandra's been invaluable during our transition period, though I should mention, the new creative direction represents a significant evolution from previous approaches. Jennifer Walsh raised an eyebrow. Evolution? Our campaign launches in 2 weeks. We've already committed media budgets based on the approved creative. That's what makes this so exciting, Victoria replied, leading the group toward the conference room. Sometimes the best innovations happen under pressure. As they entered the conference room, Cassandra caught David's eye. He looked like a man preparing for bad news, the kind of expression she'd seen on his face when discussing quarterly earnings with worried shareholders. Victoria launched into her presentation with theatrical enthusiasm. The slides were slick, colorful, completely divorced from everything Morrison Group represented. Industrial equipment positioned as lifestyle accessories, construction workers portrayed as fashion-forward trendsetters, bulldozers styled like luxury vehicles in aspirational settings. Our research shows that authenticity drives engagement across all demographics, Victoria explained, clicking through increasingly surreal mock-ups. By repositioning Morrison Group as an authentic lifestyle brand, we're not just selling equipment, we're selling identity. Tom Bradley leaned forward, studying a slide that showed an excavator in a trendy coffee shop setting. Victoria, I need to understand something. Are you suggesting we market our industrial equipment to consumers rather than businesses? I'm suggesting we think beyond traditional B2B limitations, Victoria replied smoothly. Modern marketing is about creating emotional connections, regardless of sector. Jennifer Walsh pulled out her phone, scrolling through something rapidly. Her expression grew more concerned with each swipe. These demographic targets, 18 to 34 urban professionals, they don't purchase construction equipment. Our actual buyers are procurement managers, project supervisors, fleet operators. Right, but influence patterns are changing, Victoria countered. Younger consumers drive brand perception, which affects B2B decision-making through cultural osmosis. The phrase, cultural osmosis, hung in the air like a toxic gas. David Morrison's face remained carefully neutral, but Cassandra could see the warning signs. The slight tightening around his eyes, the way his fingers drummed silently against his leg. These were the tells of a man exercising extreme self-control. Let me show you the social media strategy, Victoria continued, oblivious to the temperature dropping in the room. She clicked to a slide titled Equipment Influencer Partnerships. The proposal included hiring lifestyle bloggers to create authentic content experiences with industrial machinery. This is fascinating, David said slowly, his tone giving nothing away. Tell me, Victoria, how much construction industry experience does your team have? Victoria gestured toward the 3 interns, who looked like deer caught in headlights. Our creative team brings fresh perspectives from fashion, lifestyle, and consumer brands. Sometimes industry experience can create blind spots that prevent innovative thinking. I see. David's response was neutral, professional, terrifying in its calm. And the previous creative team, the one that developed our current campaign, where are they? We restructured for optimal strategic alignment, Victoria replied, her corporate speak becoming more pronounced under pressure. Change management sometimes requires difficult personnel decisions. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Jennifer Walsh set down her phone with the kind of deliberate precision that preceded explosions. Victoria, I'm looking at your social media strategy budget. You've allocated $800,000 for influencer partnerships with fashion bloggers. That's more than our entire traditional media spend for Q4. Investment in authentic engagement requires courage, Victoria responded, but her confidence was starting to crack. Traditional media is becoming less effective with younger demographics. What about the contract specifications? Lisa asked quietly. Morrison's agreement requires approval for any major strategic changes. They specifically wanted consistency with existing brand messaging. Victoria waved dismissively. Contracts are starting points, not limitations. Good account management means pushing clients beyond their comfort zones. David Morrison seemed very open to fresh thinking when we spoke. Sarah looked directly at Cassandra, desperation clear in her eyes. Cassandra, you spoke with Morrison yesterday. What was his reaction to these proposed changes? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The room waited, understanding that Cassandra's answer would define the power dynamic. Going forward, David expressed some concerns about campaign modifications this close to launch, Cassandra said carefully. He's planning to discuss the strategic direction in our Thursday meeting. See? Victoria's enthusiasm ratcheted up another notch. He wants to discuss it, which means he's open to evolution. Sometimes clients need time to process innovative approaches before they recognize the value. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, Victoria presenting increasingly disconnected strategies while the team asked increasingly pointed questions about logistics, budgets, and client approval processes. Each answer revealed more gaps in Victoria's understanding of their business, their clients, their industry realities. When the meeting finally ended, the team filed out in subdued silence. Sarah lingered, closing the conference room door behind her. "Cassandra, please tell me this isn't happening." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "The Morrison campaign. If we implement those changes, we'll lose the account. You know it, I know. Everyone in that room knows it. I know." Cassandra's admission felt like defeat and relief simultaneously. "So what do we do? Do we let her destroy everything we've built? Do we watch our biggest client walk away because the boss's daughter wants to make TikTok videos about bulldozers?" Before Cassandra could answer, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, perfect timing. I wanted to discuss your role in the campaign transition. I'm thinking we need some fresh energy leading the Morrison account directly." Sarah's face went white. "Fresh energy? I've been reviewing team assignments, and I think this is a great opportunity for some of our junior associates to take on more responsibility. Building tomorrow's leaders, you know?" The message was clear. Sarah was being demoted, probably replaced by someone more willing to implement Victoria's strategies without question. It was the same systematic elimination Cassandra had recognized in her own situation. Remove experienced voices, install compliant ones, rewrite history. I see. Sarah's professionalism remained intact, but Cassandra could see the devastation beneath the surface. When would this transition take place? Immediately. I want to move fast on the Morrison. Refresh. Strike while the iron is hot. After Sarah left, Victoria turned to Cassandra with renewed confidence. "I hope you can see why these changes are necessary. Sometimes loyalty to existing team members prevents us from making optimal strategic decisions." And David Morrison. "What happens if he refuses to approve the campaign changes?" Victoria's smile turned sharp. "Then we'll know Sterling and Associates isn't the right fit for his vision anymore. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose clients who can't evolve with your agency's growth." The casual dismissal of their largest client, the cavalier attitude, toward relationships that had taken years to build, it crystallized everything wrong with Victoria's approach. She wasn't just incompetent, she was dangerous. And she was about to learn exactly how dangerous underestimating client relationships could be. Cassandra's phone buzzed with a text from David Morrison. "Landing at SeaTac at 8 a.m. Thursday. See you at 10. Bring the contracts." "We don't market to younger demographics," Tom Bradley interjected, his voice sharpening. "Our equipment costs between $2 and $15 million per unit. Our buyers are established professionals making strategic capital investments." Victoria's smile wavered. "But brand perception affects all stakeholder relationships." "No." David's single word cut through her explanation like a blade. "Brand perception is irrelevant if the brand message reaches people who will never purchase your product. You're proposing to spend nearly $1 million talking to an audience that has zero influence on our sales." The room fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of Seattle traffic. Victoria looked at her presentation slides as if they might provide salvation, but the numbers were damning. Her revolutionary strategy was basic marketing malpractice disguised as innovation. "Perhaps," David continued, his tone remaining professionally courteous while delivering career-ending feedback, "you could walk us through the ROI calculations for these influencer partnerships?" Victoria's face went pale. "The ROI isn't always immediately quantifiable for brand awareness initiatives. Everything is quantifiable," Tom Bradley interrupted. "Brand awareness, consideration, purchase intent, conversion rates. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you can't justify the investment, you shouldn't make it." Cassandra watched Victoria's composure disintegrate in real time. This was what happened when theoretical knowledge met practical application, when PowerPoint presentations collided with industry reality, when confidence without competence faced actual expertise. "I think," David said, standing slowly, "we need to have a different conversation. Cassandra, could you join me privately for a moment?" As they stepped into the hallway, David's professional mask finally slipped. "Jesus Christ, Cassandra. What the hell was that? That was the future of Sterling and Associates' marketing department, Cassandra replied, surprised by her own calmness. Unless something changes very quickly. David studied her face, reading the subtext. Are you telling me that presentation represents James Sterling's vision for our account? I'm telling you that Victoria Sterling is now running all marketing operations at this agency, including your account. The creative team you've worked with for 4 years was terminated this morning. The implications settled over David like a cold front. His company had invested millions in a campaign that was 2 weeks from launch, built around creative concepts and media strategies that no longer existed. The professional relationship he'd cultivated was being dissolved without his consent. The contract guarantees he'd negotiated were being ignored. Cassandra, I need you to understand something clearly, David said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Morrison Group has a 70-year reputation for excellence. We don't experiment with our brand message. We don't chase trends. We don't hire fashion bloggers to sell bulldozers. He paused, making sure she understood the gravity of his next words. And we don't work with agencies that don't understand these basic principles. Through the conference room glass, they could see Victoria attempting to rally her intern team, while Jennifer Walsh and Tom Bradley examined campaign materials with the kind of intense scrutiny usually reserved for crime scenes. What are you going to do? Cassandra asked. David's smile was sharp, predatory. I'm going to invoke Section 12(4) of our contract, the clause that guarantees your personal involvement in strategic decisions. Sterling and Associates has breached that agreement by removing you from the account without our consent. And then? Then Sterling and Associates has 48 hours to remedy the breach, or Morrison Group will terminate our contract and pursue damages for the disruption to our campaign launch. David straightened his tie, preparing to return to the conference room. I suspect James Sterling will want to have a very serious conversation with his daughter about the cost of her innovations. The elevator to James Sterling's executive floor had never felt smaller. Cassandra stood beside Victoria, both women staring at the brass doors as floor numbers climbed toward what felt like a corporate execution. Victoria's earlier confidence had evaporated completely. Her hands trembled as she clutched her presentation folder, and she kept touching her hair like a nervous tick. He'll understand, Victoria whispered, more to herself than to Cassandra. Once Dad sees the long-term vision, the strategic thinking behind the changes. Cassandra said nothing. The scent of Victoria's expensive perfume had turned cloying in the confined space, mixing with the metallic smell of fear sweat that no amount of designer clothing could mask. Through the elevator's polished walls, Cassandra caught fragmented reflections of their distorted faces, 2 women whose careers were about to collide with reality. The doors opened onto the executive floor's marble lobby, where James Sterling's assistant waited with the expression of someone who'd witnessed corporate bloodbaths before. He's ready for you, she said simply, gesturing toward the massive oak doors that led to the corner office. James Sterling stood with his back to them, silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clasped behind his back, the posture of a man containing volcanic rage. On his desk, David Morrison's contract lay open beside a printed email with the subject line, Contract Breach Notification, 48-hour remedy period. Sit down. James didn't turn around. His voice carried the kind of cold fury that made seasoned executives update their resumes. Victoria took the chair closest to her father's desk, leaving Cassandra to sit beside her. The power dynamic was subtle but clear, Victoria still believed. Family privilege would protect her, positioning herself as the favored child seeking paternal approval. David Morrison just called me personally, James continued, finally turning to face them. His face was carved from granite, every line speaking to 3 decades of building and protecting his company's reputation. Do you know what he told me? Victoria? Victoria straightened, summoning remnants of her earlier confidence. That he needs time to process innovative approaches? Major clients often resist change initially, but he told me, James interrupted, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting, that my daughter just presented the most unprofessional, incompetent marketing strategy he's encountered in 30 years of business. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. Her face drained of color, and she gripped the armrests of her chair as if the room were spinning. He told me that you fired our entire creative team without consultation, authorization, or replacement strategy. He told me that you proposed spending nearly $1 million on fashion bloggers to sell industrial equipment to audiences who will never, in their entire lives, purchase construction machinery. James moved behind his desk, each word delivered with surgical precision. He told me that you've breached our contract by removing Cassandra from strategic oversight of his account, and that Morrison Group will terminate their relationship with Sterling and Associates unless we remedy this situation within 48 hours. Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. When she finally found her voice, it came out as a croak. Dad, if you just let me explain the strategic framework. The strategic framework? James laughed, but the sound held no humor. Victoria, Morrison Group represents 18% of our annual revenue. 18%. If we lose them, we'll have to lay off 40 employees. Their contract renewal was supposed to anchor our expansion into the Pacific Northwest market. He picked up a folder from his desk, opening it to reveal financial projections and growth charts. Do you see these numbers? This is what your strategic framework just put at risk. $22 million in annual billing. A client relationship that took 8 years to build. A reputation for excellence that took me 30 years to establish. Victoria shrank deeper into her chair, but she wasn't finished fighting. The long-term market positioning. There is no long-term if we don't have short-term survival, James snapped. Marketing theory is worthless if it destroys the clients who pay for your theories. The office fell silent except for the muffled sound of Seattle traffic 42 floors below. Cassandra watched Victoria's face cycle through emotions: confusion, denial, anger, and finally, the dawning realization that Daddy wasn't going to fix this problem. James turned his attention to Cassandra, his expression shifting from fury to something approaching desperation. David Morrison specifically requested that you resume full strategic oversight of his account. He wants the original creative team reinstated, the approved campaign restored, and written guarantees that no further changes will be made without his explicit approval. Cassandra felt the room's power dynamic shift beneath her like tectonic plates. 48 hours ago, she'd been demoted and humiliated. Now she was being asked to save the company's most important client relationship. The irony was almost beautiful. What? About Victoria? Cassandra asked quietly. Victoria's head snapped up, hope flickering in her eyes. She was waiting for her father to find a face-saving solution, a way to preserve her authority while fixing her mistakes. James's expression hardened. Victoria will be transitioning to a different role within the company, something more suited to her current skill level. The euphemism landed like a death sentence. Victoria's face crumpled, and for a moment, she looked less like an entitled corporate princess and more like a lost 28-year-old who'd just discovered that consequences were real. Dad, please, I can fix this. Give me another chance. You've had your chance, multiple chances. You've destroyed relationships, wasted resources, and put our entire company at risk. James's voice carried finality. This isn't a fairy tale, Victoria. Actions have consequences, and your actions nearly cost us our most important client. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair rolling backward. This is because of her, isn't it? She pointed at Cassandra with shaking fingers. She's been undermining me from the beginning, turning clients against me, poisoning everyone against my ideas. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. James looked at his daughter with something approaching pity. Cassandra didn't need to undermine you, Victoria. You did that perfectly well yourself. His tone gentled slightly, but the message remained brutal. She built those client relationships over 8 years of excellent work. You tried to dismantle them in 8 days based on PowerPoint slides and marketing buzzwords. Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. Tears started flowing, smearing her carefully applied makeup into dark streaks. I went to Wharton. I have an MBA. I worked at prestigious firms, none of which taught you how to listen to clients, understand their needs, or respect the work of people with more experience than you. James sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Intelligence isn't the same as wisdom, Victoria. Credentials aren't the same as competence. Through the office's massive windows, Cassandra could see storm clouds gathering over Elliott Bay. The metaphor was almost too obvious, but somehow appropriate. Victoria's brief reign had been like a sudden squall, destructive, chaotic, and ultimately short-lived. What happens now? Cassandra asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. James opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder with Cassandra's name on it. Morrison Group has agreed to continue their relationship with Sterling and Associates under specific conditions. You resume full authority over their account and all related strategic decisions. The original creative team is reinstated immediately. Victoria is removed from any client-facing responsibilities. He slid the folder across his desk. They're also requesting that you personally oversee the implementation of their Q4 campaign launch to ensure no further disruptions. Cassandra opened the folder to find a contract amendment that essentially gave her complete autonomy over the Morrison account, along with budget authority and personnel decisions that exceeded her previous role. It was more than restoration. It was promotion wrapped in crisis management. And my title? She asked. Executive Director of Strategic Accounts, James replied. Effective immediately, along with a compensation adjustment that reflects your value to this company. Victoria let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. So she gets rewarded for my failure? She gets rewarded for preventing your failure from destroying us, James corrected. The difference is important. As if summoned by the completion of Victoria's downfall, James's assistant appeared at the door. Mr. Sterling, David Morrison is on line 1. He'd like to speak with Cassandra directly. The moment had arrived. Cassandra stood, straightening her blazer, preparing to rebuild what had been nearly destroyed. Behind her, Victoria sat crumpled in her chair, the weight of real consequences finally crushing her manufactured confidence. David? Cassandra said, accepting the phone from James. It's Cassandra. I understand you have some concerns about our service delivery. Victoria Sterling walked into her father's office like she owned it. Again. I've been thinking about this morning's misunderstanding. She placed a leather portfolio on James's desk with deliberate precision. There are some facts that weren't properly contextualized during our earlier conversation. Cassandra felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. Victoria's transformation was complete. Gone was the sobbing, broken woman from an hour ago. In her place stood someone who'd clearly spent the last 60 minutes with a lawyer, a publicist, or both. Facts? James's voice carried warning, but Victoria pressed forward. David Morrison's contract complaint, for instance. Section 12.4 doesn't actually require Cassandra's involvement. It requires senior strategic oversight from designated account leadership. That designation changed when I became director. Victoria opened her portfolio, revealing printed emails and legal documents. I spoke with our legal department. The contract breach claim is questionable at best. Cassandra's chest tightened. Victoria had spent her exile researching, building a case, preparing to fight back with corporate ammunition. This wasn't desperate flailing. This was calculated warfare. Interesting interpretation, James said carefully. What's more interesting is this. Victoria pulled out a printed email chain. Morrison Group's internal communications from last week, obtained through my personal networking contacts. They've been shopping for new agencies. 3 of them. The contract complaint was leverage to negotiate better terms, not genuine dissatisfaction. The accusation detonated like a bomb in the quiet office. David Morrison, loyal client and Cassandra's supposed ally, potentially using the chaos to extract concessions. Cassandra's mind raced through their recent conversations, searching for signs of deception, manipulation, strategic positioning disguised as partnership. "That's impossible," Cassandra said. But even as the words left her mouth, she remembered David's executive team at Thursday's meeting, not routine quarterly review participants, negotiation witnesses. Victoria smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Is it? Think about it, Cassandra. Morrison Group's contract expires in 6 weeks. They need renewal negotiations. What better way to establish leverage than creating a crisis that makes us desperate to keep them?" James moved behind his desk, studying the documents Victoria had produced. His expression was unreadable, but Cassandra could see him processing possibilities, weighing evidence against assumptions. "These emails? How did you obtain them?" "Jennifer Walsh, Morrison's VP of Marketing. We went to business school together, stayed in touch." Victoria's confidence was building with each revelation. She mentioned their agency search 3 months ago, asked about Sterling's stability, our future direction. I thought it was casual networking. Now I realize it was reconnaissance. The room felt like it was tilting. If Victoria was right, then David Morrison's heroic defense of Cassandra was actually sophisticated manipulation. His contract clause complaints were theater designed to strengthen his negotiating position. His expressions of loyalty were tools for extracting better terms. Jennifer specifically mentioned concerns about our aging leadership approach, Victoria continued, reading from her notes. Morrison Group wants innovative marketing, but they also want the security of knowing they can control their agency through contract clauses and personal relationships. Cassandra's phone buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, she glanced at it. "David Morrison. Can we discuss contract renewal terms this afternoon? Some flexibility might be beneficial for both parties." The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Victoria watched Cassandra's face carefully, reading her reaction like a poker player detecting tells. "He texted you, didn't he?" Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "Asking about contract negotiations? Mentioning flexibility? That's not the behavior of a grateful client who just got his preferred account manager restored. That's a buyer who thinks he has leverage." James took the phone from Cassandra's numb fingers, reading the message. His expression darkened as the implication settled over him. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. Victoria pressed her advantage. "Dad, Morrison Group played us. They used the transition chaos to create artificial leverage for their renewal negotiations." Cassandra's restoration wasn't about competence. It was about giving them someone they think they can control through personal relationships and contract clauses. The accusations were coming too fast, too well documented to dismiss easily. Cassandra felt her moment of triumph curdling into something much more complicated. Had David Morrison really been her ally, or had she been used as a pawn in a larger game? "Even if that's true," Cassandra said, fighting to maintain her equilibrium, "your presentation was still a disaster. The creative team was still fired without cause. The campaign was still nearly destroyed." "Was it?" Victoria pulled out another document, a folder marked Morrison Group Q4 Strategy, Alternative Approach. "I spent this morning working with external consultants, developing a hybrid strategy that incorporates traditional B2B elements with targeted digital innovation, something that addresses Morrison's stated desire for fresh approaches while respecting their operational constraints." She handed the folder to James, who opened it with obvious reluctance. Inside were campaign mock-ups that looked nothing like the fashion blogger disaster from earlier. Professional, industry-appropriate, innovative within acceptable boundaries. The work of someone who'd learned from catastrophic failure and applied expensive lessons quickly. "This is what I should have presented this morning," Victoria admitted. "I got carried away with theory and forgot about practical application. But that doesn't mean the underlying strategic direction was wrong, just poorly executed." Cassandra stared at the revised campaign materials, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet again. Victoria's new strategy was actually decent. Not brilliant, but competent. Appropriate. The kind of work that demonstrated growth, learning, the ability to recover from mistakes. "The creative team?" James asked. "Should be reinstated, obviously. With apologies and compensation for the disruption." Victoria's tone was professional, contrite without being servile. "My personnel decisions were premature and poorly communicated. I take full responsibility for that error." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of air conditioning and the muffled sounds of a city going about its business while corporate dramas played out in glass towers. Cassandra felt like she was watching her vindication slip away in real time, replaced by something much more complex and uncomfortable. "So, what are you proposing?" James asked his daughter. "Joint leadership of the Morrison account. Cassandra's client relationship expertise combined with my strategic innovation capabilities. A partnership that gives Morrison the security they want while pushing them toward the growth they need." Victoria looked directly at Cassandra for the first time since entering the office. "We work together, or we both lose to whatever agency Morrison Group has been courting as our replacement." The proposal hung in the air like a challenge and an olive branch simultaneously. Victoria Sterling, who'd been professionally destroyed just hours earlier, was offering to share power rather than surrender it completely. More disturbing, her analysis of Morrison Group's motivations was starting to make uncomfortable sense. Cassandra's phone buzzed again. Another message from David Morrison. "Also wondering if we could discuss reducing our campaign oversight requirements. Trust is a two-way street after all." The message felt like a slap. David Morrison, her supposed champion, was already leveraging their restored relationship to extract concessions. Victoria watched Cassandra read the message, her expression mixing satisfaction with something that might have been sympathy. "He's good," Victoria said quietly. "I'll give him that. Use the crisis to create dependency, then exploit the dependency to improve his negotiating position." Classic strategic manipulation. James Sterling looked between his daughter and the woman who'd just saved his company, weighing loyalty against competence, sentiment against strategy. The decision he made in the next few minutes would define not just their careers, but the entire future direction of Sterling and Associates. "Cassandra," he said finally, "what do you think about Victoria's proposal?" Cassandra stared at Victoria's revised campaign materials, her mind churning through 8 years of client relationships and corporate politics. The proposal wasn't just about sharing power. It was about acknowledging that she'd been outmaneuvered by someone she'd trusted completely. "Give me a minute." Cassandra stood, moving to the window overlooking the city. Below, people hurried along sidewalks, making decisions based on incomplete information, trusting relationships that might be strategic theater, just like she had. The reflection in the glass showed 2 women watching her. James Sterling's daughter, who'd learned from humiliation faster than most people learned from success, and her own face, trying to process betrayal disguised as loyalty. "You know what the worst part is?" Cassandra turned back to face them. "David Morrison is probably right. This industry is built on relationships, and relationships are just power dynamics with better PR." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "I'm not proposing we become cynical. I'm proposing we become smarter. Smart enough to manipulate our clients before they manipulate us. Smart enough to recognize manipulation when we see it and respond strategically rather than emotionally." Victoria closed her portfolio, the movement deliberate. "Cassandra, you're brilliant at building trust. I'm good at reading people's motivations. Morrison Group needs both skills, whether they realize it or not." James Sterling watched this exchange. with the expression of a man witnessing his daughter's transformation from liability to asset in real time. The board meeting is in an hour. I need a decision. Cassandra's phone buzzed again. David Morrison. Looking forward to our conversation about contract flexibility. Perhaps we can find mutually beneficial terms. The message felt different now, less like partnership, more like gentle coercion. Morrison Group would work with Sterling and Associates, but only on their terms, with their preferred level of control, using their restored relationship with Cassandra as leverage for better deals. He's not wrong, you know, Cassandra said quietly. Trust is a two-way street, but he's been driving in both directions while I walked in one. So what do we do about it? Victoria asked. Cassandra smiled, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not defeat, not even resignation. Clarity. We give him exactly what he's asking for. Partnership, mutual benefit, two-way trust. She moved to James's desk, pulling out her phone. David, it's Cassandra. About those contract discussions, I think Victoria Sterling and I should join you for those conversations. You know, make sure we're all aligned on expectations. David Morrison's pause was barely perceptible, but Victoria caught it, nodding approvingly. Of course, David replied, smoothly. The more perspectives, the better. When works for you? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Victoria will be presenting our integrated strategic approach for the renewal period. Cassandra met Victoria's eyes, seeing understanding pass between them. I think you'll find our partnership brings some interesting capabilities to the table. After ending the call, the office fell silent. James Sterling looked between his daughter and the woman who'd just chosen collaboration over vindication. That was either brilliant or career suicide, he observed. Sometimes they're the same thing, Cassandra replied. Victoria, can you deliver on that integrated strategy by tomorrow morning? Already done. Been working on it since this afternoon. Victoria's confidence was different now, earned rather than inherited. Morrison Group thinks they're negotiating from strength, but they're about to discover their leverage isn't as solid as they assumed. Meaning I've spent the last few hours researching their agency search. The 3 firms they're considering, one just lost their biggest client, another is facing a federal investigation for billing irregularities, and the third specializes in consumer goods, not industrial equipment. Victoria's smile was sharp, but not cruel. They need us more than they've been letting on. James Sterling leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. So, tomorrow morning's meeting isn't just about renewal terms. It's about resetting the entire relationship dynamic. Exactly, Cassandra confirmed. David Morrison wants partnership and mutual benefit? He's about to get more partnership than he bargained for. The intercom buzzed with James's assistant's voice. The board members are arriving for the emergency meeting. James stood, straightening his tie. Ladies, I have a company to save, and a board to convince that nepotism nearly destroyed us, but strategic thinking might save us. He looked at his daughter directly. Victoria, you'll present the Morrison situation to the board yourself. Success and failure, lessons learned, path forward. Victoria nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. And if they ask whether I'm qualified for this responsibility? Then you tell them qualification isn't about where you start, it's about how quickly you learn from mistakes and adapt to reality, James replied. Today, you learned faster than people with decades of experience. As they prepared to leave for the board meeting, Cassandra felt the strange satisfaction that came with solving complex problems through collaboration rather than competition. Victoria Sterling had nearly destroyed everything, then helped rebuild it stronger than before. David Morrison had manipulated them all, but was about to discover that manipulation was a game two could play. One more thing, Cassandra said as they reached the door. When we're in that meeting tomorrow with Morrison Group, we present a united front. Whatever happens in that room, We're partners first, competitors never. Victoria extended her hand. Partners? Cassandra shook it, feeling the calluses that came from a day spent rebuilding a career from the ground up. Partners? 6 months later, Cassandra Thorne stood in the conference room of Sterling and Associates' new Pacific Northwest offices, watching Victoria Sterling present their integrated marketing strategy to a room full of potential clients. The Morrison Group contract had been renewed on terms favorable to Sterling and Associates, establishing them as the premier industrial marketing agency in the region. The nameplate on the conference room door read, Thorne Sterling Strategic Marketing. Division. Equal billing, shared authority, complementary skills deployed for maximum impact. The key to authentic B2B marketing, Victoria was explaining to the assembled executives, is understanding that business relationships are personal relationships with professional consequences. You can't separate the human element from the strategic element. In the back of the room, David Morrison caught Cassandra's eye and nodded approvingly. The relationship had evolved from manipulation to genuine partnership, built on mutual respect rather than leverage. Morrison Group had learned that Sterling and Associates was more formidable as true partners than as controlled vendors. Cassandra's phone buzzed with a text from James Sterling. Board-approved expansion into 3 new markets. The partnership model is working. Well done. She smiled, watching Victoria field questions with confidence earned through failure, success, and the hard work of becoming worthy of the opportunities she'd been given. Sometimes the best partnerships came from the most unlikely places, between people who'd started as adversaries and discovered they were stronger together than apart. The presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause. As clients filed out, discussing contract terms and implementation timelines, Victoria approached Cassandra with the expression of satisfied exhaustion. So, Victoria said, ready for the next challenge? Cassandra looked around at the thriving business they'd built together, the team they'd assembled, the clients they'd won through competence rather than manipulation. Always. Outside the conference room windows, Seattle's skyline stretched toward distant mountains, full of possibility and untested potential. Somewhere in those glass towers, other people were navigating betrayal and opportunity, learning that success sometimes came from the most unexpected partnerships. But that was their story to tell. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.